if you had said it to me beforehand, I would have said, like, what I wanted was to be a success out of the gate. Like, of course, that's what everyone wants. And there was years there where things were really, really difficult because it wasn't happening and it was the thing I wanted most in the world and I had no control over it. Like, I had done the best I could do and it still wasn't working because of publishers or because readers weren't into that or whatever. So I'm actually happy that it happened the way it did, because every good thing I could so appreciate. Like when we got Book of the Month in the US and we got like the Barnes & Noble monthly thriller pick, I got like a New York Times review. Like I sat in bed and cried when that happened, because like if it's your first book and that stuff happens, you must think this is publishing. This is how it happens for everyone. This is normal. I knew none of that was normal by a country mile. And so I was able to really, really appreciate it. And I like the direction. I feel like I've slowly like eked my way like into success rather than having, you know, a debut that like sells millions. Must be nice, but I do wonder where there is to go from there, and also what like a you know, a mind melt it must be to not know what's normal and what's not. And you see a lot of the times with authors who get everything on the first book and are kind of stunned when they realize slowly that's not how it's going to be every time. I much prefer now doing it in the opposite direction. And that's not to say that like everything has been, you know, amazing since then, but certainly it proves that like it can happen and brought me a lot of new readers and encourages me to keep going. I try to write a completely different book each time. All my books are standalones. I've never done a sequel, have no interest in doing a series, love reading them, don't want to write them. And so that means that like I have really freedom, and sometimes I like to really push that freedom to its limits. And I think Rewind and Runtime, which weirdly are both stuff to do with movies, and Surveillance, are the two weirdest books. So if anyone is like, Runtime is my favorite Catherine Reinhard book, I'm very suspicious of them. So my brother's an actor, and a few years ago he was in an Irish independent horror movie called Beyond the Woods, and it was filmed very like Runtime in this like country house out in the middle of nowhere in the wilds of winter. Very, very low budget. I think half the budget was like the director's credit card limit. But they did it. And John, my brother, said, he told me like all these stories from set. And one of them was when we arrived, the director had to go to the local Garda station, the local police station, and say, look, if you hear screams at 4 a.m. out in those woods, no one's getting murdered. It's just us like filming a scene. And of course, I immediately thought, well, what if it was someone getting murdered? Like that'd be a great way to get a bit of a head start on, you know, the investigation. And so that's where Runtime came from. And I didn't want to push a script inside the book. There is a full script for a movie inside the book because what's happening in the movie starts happening on the set. So it was important that readers know what was happening on the set, or on the movie rather. And I thought I was going to get away with like writing an outline of the movie or something. And my editor was like, this like outlines are just too boring to read. No one's going to want to read that. So you have to write a full script. But the thing is, in the novel, the person who's written the script is not supposed to be very good at screenwriting. So I feel like I kind of was safe enough there. But if it wasn't a very good script, it was fine. Yeah.
Did you sample any? I mean, did you get some to look at how they were structured
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, so in Ireland, we have Screen Ireland. It used to be called the Irish Film Board. And they do a lot of really good, like heavily subsidized courses on screenwriting and telling stories on screen. So I've done a few of them, not because I want to write screenplays. I've no interest. They sound like way too much work. And I don't play well with others. So I couldn't be dealing with all the like, you know, notes from 10 people who've never written themselves and stuff. But I love structure. So I did those courses like for that. And a couple of my friends are screenwriters. So it's not anything like complex, or it's a very simple script, but it is at least formatted correctly. The origins of the trap is what we call the vanishing triangle. So during the 90s here in Ireland, we had 8 women go missing over a period of 5 years. And here we are 30 years later with absolutely no answers. We still don't know what happened to any of them, and no bodies have been found, and no one's been charged in connection with any of them. And I can't overstate how unusual that was in Ireland at the time. If that happened now, it would be incredibly unusual. And so I was a teenager in the 90s. That's when I started paying attention to the news, and what was all over the news, Irish women were just being snatched into the dark and no one was doing anything about it. And so I think that had a real formative effect on me in terms of my relationship with true crime and therefore crime fiction. And The Trap is completely fictional. It is set in the present day. It features completely fictional people, but I was certainly thinking about those cases as I was writing it. It's the story of Lucy, whose sister has been missing for about a year when the novel begins, and she just can't take it anymore. She can't take not knowing. The obsession with finding out what has happened has actually overtaken the grief, potentially, of the loss. And it's about, where do you go when that happens? Like, how far would you go if you just had to know? Which weirdly is also what Adam is asking in Distress Signal. So I kind of went way back to the start in terms of what I was writing about. But yeah, it sets her off on a path. She takes matters into her own hands. So the tagline for the UK edition is, "To catch a killer, she'll become a victim." So she's playing bait for the man who took her sister. And I don't think she has any plans beyond that, but that is all she can think to do in the desperate place that she's in. Well, in terms of books, I'm currently working on what will presumably be out next year, unless there's some horrible disaster. So this book is about a ghostwriter, and it's my first book that will be set in the States. Still featuring Irish people, but they happen to be in Florida. And also, hopefully, if the writer's strike ever comes to an end, Amazon Studios and Atomic Monster are developing 56 Days, set in a fictional version of Seaside, which is the town where The Truman Show was filmed. I was there last year, and hopefully we'll be there again soon. So I love that town. But what was really funny is I took lots of videos and stuff that I put on Instagram, and I'm always very careful not to put people who didn't agree to be on my social media in videos and stuff. So a lot of the videos were taken very early in the morning and there was no one in it. So it gave the impression that this town was completely empty and creepy and abandoned. And everyone started commenting on that. So that sort of gave me an idea of maybe setting something in a sort of weird Stepford style, too perfect town. But it's just a fictional version of Seaside, which I dearly love. And it's not creepy at all.